Hello and welcome to another intimate conversation with me, Anna Sansom, and my very special guest today, Lara Waldman, the Abundance Activator. For those of you who are new to these conversations, I'm the author of a book called Desire Lines, which is all about exploring our own paths of sexual expression and sexual exploration. And it's really saying, if we strip away all of the messages that we're given by society and our culture, where do we want to go with our sexuality? What matters to us and what paths might we take with it? And I am thrilled to get to talk with you today, Lara, because I went back and checked, and it's about a year ago to the day that you shared a post on Instagram. And the opening caption of that post was, your abundance lies in the shadows of shame. And I was so intrigued by this that I carried on reading your post. And in that post, you were talking about the relationship between the work that you do, manifesting abundance and aligning with our heart and inner wisdom, and the role of sexual energy, pleasure, intimacy, and shame in that work. And I remember reading this post and just thinking, oh my goodness, here's somebody who's really kind of captured a lot of what I feel around the importance of our sexual selves in our whole lives, not just in our sex lives. And I don't know if you remember, but I sent you a direct message and just said, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing this. And thank you for your courage in sharing as well, because I know that it was quite a leap for you at that time to be speaking openly about this work. So I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk with you, Lara, today. And what we would really like to do is have a conversation that we can share with anybody who's watching or listening to this video, which goes into more detail about these words that I've just been using. So things like intimacy, pleasure, shame, but also abundance and alignment and consciously creating our lives. So I'll just for people who don't know you yet, Lara, Lara is the Abundance Activator. She's an incredible person who has also written a book called Money Manifestation Mastery. And she runs courses and groups and events for people who are looking to create more, consciously create their life in an aligned way. And I'll let you share more about what it is exactly you do, Lara. But I wonder if, first of all, maybe if you could actually just tell us a bit about the work that you do, and also how you came to realize that things like pleasure and sexual energy and shame were actually key contributors to the work. So, I mean, that's quite a big question, but if you could just plunge in, that would be fantastic.
Really, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And it's really special for me to be able to talk with you about this because I don't often talk around sexual energy. I'm often talking about money, but I don't get a chance to so much talk about this. So I'm really, really glad to be able to speak about this with you. And yeah, and like I say, everything I've learned and everything I teach, I've learned the hard way. I've learned by going through, suffering and struggling and pain first in order to find the gold. So I struggled a lot with physical health problems. I started getting thrush and vaginal thrush from age of 8
Mm.
and really struggled with my digestion. And I finally found out I had something called candida, which was sort of diet related, stress related. And that took me on a journey through natural health. And I started to then uncover this emotional challenges that I've been struggling with depression that took me into on this healing journey. And it's been this 25-year experience, right, of really uncovering and discovering how much sort of emotional trauma I had, that was affecting my mind, affecting my actions, affecting my physical health, affected every area of my life. And it's been a really fascinating and challenging journey of moving through that. Within there was this sort of knowing that there was something more. I had this sort of deep sense that this wasn't it, and somehow I felt very stuck and trapped in my pain. And there was some little voice, this very, very quiet voice that was sort of guiding me through and leading me through. But in terms of, so I was very sort of purpose driven. I had this sense that I was here to make a difference to the world, and to transform the world and heal the world and help the world from all the pain and suffering. But of course, to do that journey, we have to go within. And I've been on a very powerful inner journey. And it started really through the vehicle of my business. And then, then really struggling financially. And so I started to work with money and money manifestation first, because this is what I was really struggling with. And I get, when I meditate, when I tune in, I get what I call downloads or inner guidance. And I was given the information or the guidance that I was here to help get money in the hands of heart-centered women, and really awaken that kind of feminine power to do, money and business from a heart-aligned place. But part of that journey was really quite funny, because I was working with money manifestation, and all that was coming up was around my relationship with sex and my relationship with intimacy. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm here trying to manifest money. I'm not here to talk about sex and intimacy. And basically it's been a long journey, but started to understand that how much I had shut down, how much pain and how much trauma there'd been around my sexual energy that was affecting my intimacy, in my marriage with myself, but also in every area of life, because intimacy isn't just about sex, is it? It's so much deeper than that. Um, and my body was guiding me into creating and working from a different place. So what kept happening to me all throughout from my later teens and through my 20s, is I was kind of working from this very, I would call it sort of like this wounded masculine energy, where I was pushing hard and working hard and doing a lot of action. And what happened is this made me very sick. So every time I started to kind of work from this pushing, forcing, doing lots of action place, which I feel I was trained in, like that's how you do things, that's how you're a successful human, my body would shut down and I'd get ill and I'd have to stop. And so my body was guiding me into a different way of creating, which I would call creating from pleasure now, or from a place of relaxation. But honestly, I learned this like bashing my head against a brick wall. It took me a long time to wake up to the fact that my body wisdom and this inner intelligence was telling me that way, all this sort of wounded masculine, lots of action, pushing, forcing. My body was stopping me to go, hey, there's a whole other way of doing this. And it's really about awakening. First was about like stopping, relaxing, letting go. And then I started to be guided journey of how we create most powerfully and effectively from a place of pleasure, from a place of kind of relaxation that is absolutely, not even taught. And so then, immediately when this started waking up, it was like, well, there's the shame, the shame barrier that tells us, no, that is not allowed. That's breaking the rules. That is, a really bad and dangerous way of being, right? Especially, for that feminine energy. There's so much kind of wounded feminine energy as well. So that's sort of the start, just to give you kind of obviously it's been a long journey, but a little intro, sort of general intro into the start of kind of waking up to creating from pleasure.
Thank you. That's such powerful work. And I don't know how other people are reacting, but even hearing the words used in that way is really powerful. So, the phrase creating from pleasure, like when do we ever hear that phrase used? Like you say, it's just not what we've been taught. And I know for me, like my creativity and my sexuality are completely interlinked. So my sexual energy feels my creative energy, which feeds my sexual energy, and so forth and so around. And so I can completely get that in order to kind of create our lives, we have this resource to tap into. But that, as you say, it's not what we've been taught. We've been taught to either create from our heads or create from this place of pushing and doing, and this completely different way of looking at things. And I'm really curious about, because I started off saying about this other phrase that you used about the shadows of shame, and how these arise, particularly for many women and people who've been socialized as female, that as soon as we start to kind of embrace our pleasure, or prioritize our pleasure, often shame can begin to come through. And I know that you work a lot with things that block our abundance and block kind of this conscious creating of our lives. So what role does shame have in that for you personally, but for you in terms of your work?
Yeah, so shame is a really fascinating one because it's often in the unconscious. So, first of all, what's really important to acknowledge is that we're not always aware that shame is running us, or
Mm.
actually stopping us from welcoming in more pleasure, for example, or welcoming in anything that you desire, right? So be that money, be that, love, be that sex, be that health, whatever it is. So shame actually acts like this huge blocker from conscious creation and from creating a life that's really in alignment with yourself, with your body, with your desires, right? And so it's very sneaky. So it's a sneaky shadow, meaning that we may not be consciously aware that shame is there. And it's because shame feels so bad. So as soon as we even go anywhere near that shadow of shame, there'll be an avoidance strategy that comes up. So it'll just be like, go the other direction, right? So it'll be getting distracted, or it'll be, I don't know, there'll be all sorts of patterns and programs that come up to avoid you from even going anywhere near the shame. So that thing to first identify is it might not be obviously shame, but it creates a huge amount of avoidance. So I talk about being a courageous deep diver, where we go and meet this shame and meet that shadow as a beautiful kind of portal for transformation, because that shame barrier, is just a lot of pain. It's a lot of protection, and well-meaning, well-meaning parents, well-meaning people, well-meaning society, well-meaning culture that believes they're protecting us from something that's bad, right? That's dangerous. And so for me, it's very much about a relationship with, the feminine energy, this beautiful creative energy, which for me is nature. It's part of nature, the life-giving energy that we've been, really hurting and harming, and through the vehicle of our bodies, right? And there's so many ways that we are actively shamed, but then all those ways that we shame ourselves. So there's so much, so much, so much unconscious programming and conditioning that we can't kind of consciously identify. But yeah, so we want to go into the shame to unlock our creative power, but it means going into some very, very, very painful and uncomfortable feelings, which is, for me, it was like, I am bad. I am disgusting.
Mm.
I am wrong. This is not okay. This is dangerous, right? This is destructive. So so for me, it's like going in and having to really face all of these beliefs that I now know aren't the truth, but when you're navigating through them, it feels so risky, right? It feels so
Mm.
uncomfortable. So that's sort of the first step, is to kind of identify that shame is often very unconscious, and it shows up in lots of ways, and we need to go and meet it to get curious, and then we can start to kind of set ourselves free, and then we start going through it's the pain portal into the pleasure portal,
Mm.
right? So like going in to understand that like when we have the courage to go through the shame, this is when that abundance, or that pleasure, that creative power starts to reveal itself.
Mm. Very powerful. And I know that you've talked before about kind of like this interrelationship between money, sex, and power. And there's something for me about like really being willing to embrace all of those aspects of ourselves. And if in order to embrace that, as you say, that part of the pathway is to become aware of, and to, I mean, it's interesting, this whole like the shadows of shame, because like my feeling is that it's almost like you need to shine a torch on it, like you shine a light on it. And it reminds me of like being a little kid and you think there's a monster in the corner of your room, and then you put the light on and it's just a pile of clothes on a chair or something like that. It's like,
Yes.
how do what it's a lot of it, I think, is about our perception, isn't it? About what we perceive is going on around us, or what we perceive our feelings are telling us. And sometimes we do need to, yeah, shine that light on them in order to understand better and to see beyond that, what's beyond that. And I certainly, for me, like the potential for pleasure lying beyond that, the potential for abundance in all of its forms. You reference nature, and so for me a big part of it is about thriving. It's not just the surviving, but it's really thriving and being connected to our inner nature as much as we're connected to the outer natural world. And so to know that part of our inner nature is around this potential for pleasure and potential for enjoyment and potential for joy, and all these other things, which even as I'm saying those words, they almost feel like they could be gifts, and yet they shouldn't have to be gifted to us, or it feels like they should just be an integral part of our lives. What is our life without pleasure and fun and enjoyment, and consciously being able to create and the life that we want to lead, I guess. And I mean, I love the overlaps between what you're talking about and what I talk about in Desire Lines, in terms of these different journeys that we can make throughout our lives. And sometimes we make a journey with a destination in mind, and sometimes we really don't know where we're headed, do we? And that for me is quite exciting as well. So I wonder, like, just this term pleasure. I mean, I love that word. It fills me with joy, even just saying it. But can you talk a bit more about what pleasure can look like in our lives? So, I mean, I don't know if that's a very good question, but it's kind of around, I guess it's about permission. Like, what can we give ourselves permission to have when it comes to pleasure?
Mm. Well, goodness. I mean, yeah, it is about, for me, it's such a powerful practice to first just, yeah, give yourself permission to welcome in more pleasure is a radical act, right? Already. And so what's coming in with that question is all the moments, right? How we're being throughout our day. So there's obviously, our body is a pleasure portal. Our physical body is designed for pleasure. And that's been, there's so much history of shaming that. And so in just the way that we move and we be through our day is how we can start welcoming more pleasure. And for me, it's about presence, right? We find pleasure through presence. I don't think we can really have pleasure without being present. So it could be how, I don't know, just getting the image of chopping basil. I love the smell of fresh basil when you're cooking and just really welcoming in the smell. Or if after a bath or a shower, like putting oil over your body and just really basking in the pleasure of the oil on your skin, or the pleasure of maybe putting music on and listening to the sound, or maybe moving through the body and being out in nature, just really allowing yourself to experience the pleasure of in nature. Or for me, it's always like immersing in water, the pleasure of your body entering the water, whether it's that warm bath or the sea or, even a pool. And so it's sort of allowing those senses, the body senses to wake up and to start to just actively welcome pleasure. And also within sexual intimacy as well, whether that's, self-pleasuring or with a partner, opening up to welcoming that in as a pleasurable experience. And what happens is we're so programmed and conditioned into basically just getting the job done, whatever that is, and just getting it done and ticking the boxes and going through. It's very cut off and disconnected. So for me, I have to remind myself to welcome pleasure in all the time. It's very natural to just go into sort of this automatic doing. It just means slowing down a little bit, taking a little bit more space and time. It's really how you choose to do something. So even with work, we can choose to do it from a place of sort of stress and getting the job done, or ooh, how can I bring more pleasure into this? So we can choose, it could be drinking a glass of water, you know, it can be all of these little moments, but it does require making a conscious choice and a decision and reminding yourself that one, you're allowed,
Mm.
and two, that's available, that's even a thing, right? Because I think most people aren't even aware that that's a thing that you can actually do.
Yeah, yeah. And I completely agree. I mean, I'm a water fiend, you know, I love going in the sea. I think that for me is the time when I am it's one of the two times when I'm the most present, I would say, in myself. So one is being in the sea because, you know, I kind of have to be present to the sensations because they are so massive. And the other times would be during sexual intimacy. Like that's the other time when I try or I am the most present to myself. But as you say, it's kind of bringing in bringing in parts of that throughout our days. So it's not just in these confined experiences, but we can actually keep reminding ourselves of our potential for pleasure throughout the day. So yeah, chopping basil or whatever herb of our choice. That
Yeah,
sounds
exactly.
great. I'm very excited at the moment. The our neighbours have got lots of lavender bushes and they're just beginning, the leaves are just coming back. And if I rub them when I'm out walking, and then I get that beautiful lavender scent on my fingers. And it's moments like that as well, really special.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. I think what's sort of coming to me around this as well is there's a really interesting connection between pleasure and pain. So I think sometimes in order to find that pleasure and welcome that in, we do need to go through some pain portals. So
mm,
for example, like around sex, maybe if there's sexual trauma, right? It might be a journey to move through pain in order to welcome in the pleasure, to because we need to feel really relaxed and safe and
mm,
open to welcome in pleasure. So maybe it hasn't been safe to be really present with life, or maybe as a young child you were just in a total play zone and you were shouted at or punished for, I don't know, not tidying up the toys or whatever, right? And so we learn, like, if I go into that kind of presence of pleasure, something bad might happen, right? So we have a lot of pain trauma in our body as well. And so this is, for me, it's been very, very difficult. It's been very, very difficult and painful journey to welcome in pleasure. It's not
mm,
something I found easy, and it's still not something that I find easy. Just to say, I haven't mastered this by any means. It's a constant remembering, and sometimes being willing to be with the pain in order. Again, the pain is the portal to pleasure.
mm. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you know, several years ago when The Secret came out and people were talking about manifesting, and it was all about the kind of the positive light, you know, focus on the positive and all that kind of thing. And people wouldn't have talked about things like shame or pain and, you know, having to go through these things to find your way, and having to kind of like consciously open up or uh, yeah, being able to relax into those experiences. So, I mean, do you think that this is a shift in how we think about manifestation, or do you think there's still some people are still kind of in the more of the I'll call it the secret mode, you know, the let's just focus on the positive, and we, you know, we won't put that light on shame, we won't go anywhere near the pain, we'll just kind of bypass it.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of bypassing going on. And it's funny, I smile because The Secret was one of the first things I came across around manifesting. And I was all, you know, positive visualization and the affirmations and the, you know, doing all of that. And then I started to get really curious because I was like, some things were manifesting and some things weren't. And so I started going, well, why isn't that manifesting? And this is where I started to meet pain, and I started to meet trauma, and I started to meet wounding. It's like, why is no one talking about this? Why is no one talking about the profound healing and transformational journey you have to go in? Some things will just manifest because you're aligned and it's, you know, fine, and it's not traumatic to welcome that in. But for me, some things have been very, very painful to welcome in and to say yes to, right? Because of trauma, really, and old wounding. So I think for me, it's essential to do the shadow work. It's essential to do the trauma work. It's essential to do the pain work. And I don't know any human being that doesn't carry some kind of pain and trauma, whether it be it from your own lifetime or from ancestral trauma.
Mm,
So, so I think there's still a lot of, yeah, mindset and visualization. All of that is really powerful, and being grateful and stepping into the vibration of gratitude. All of that is still true, but you can't skirt over. For me, it just, that's what creates a huge block to manifesting into creation, is if we're not doing the deep diving into the shadows as well.
mm,
That's been my experience anyhow. We
yeah.
need to go in there in order to really transform and create really kind of embodied, grounded, powerful, effective change on this planet.
Mm, mm. Thank you. And I think there are huge parallels with what you've just described and sex itself, because we're sold this image of sex and intimacy as being something, like the candles and the rose petals and the soft music and the simultaneous climaxing and all that kind of thing. But actually, the reality of being a sexual person is that sometimes it's messy, painful, noisy. It's not always beautiful. But if we're not willing to kind of embrace all of that, we don't get to experience the fullness of our own sexuality and the potential and pleasure and that kind of thing. So
Absolutely.
I just really love the parallels. And I guess I probably shouldn't think of them as parallels because of course everything is so interrelated, all the, our whole beings. So yeah, thank you. Thank you. And that I think gives people a flavor of you and where you're coming from and your work. And I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to talk about it, because I don't hear enough of these conversations. And this is partly why I want to do these intimate conversations with different people, because for me, everybody has their own perspective, and all of those perspectives are valuable. And so often in life, we're kind of just given the mainstream view of things, or one way of looking at it, or if you're lucky, like in politics, you get 2 or 3 choices and that's your lot. But I'm really like a big advocate of people asking the questions of themselves as well. And so I would say, if anything that we've been talking about has stimulated curiosity in somebody watching or listening to this, to begin to ask those questions for themselves, but also to reach out if they would like any more information or any more support with anything that we've covered. So what's the best way for people to connect with you and your work?
Yes, so I'm on a few different platforms. So there's my website, larawaldman.com. You can find me on Instagram under Lara Waldman Official. You can find me on Facebook. My Facebook page is Lara Waldman Abundance Activator. I'm also on YouTube. If you put in Lara Waldman Abundance Activator again, you will find me there. And I've got a Facebook group where I spend a lot of time called the Abundant Business Network as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I know that you're actually running a free online retreat next week. Would you like to just say a little bit about that in case people would like to join in and actually, have a real live taste of your work?
Oh, that would be lovely. Yeah, so it's called the Living Wealth Retreat, and it's a free 7-day online event. We meet for about 45 minutes to an hour each day, and each day we focus on a different area. I've do focus on money on some of those days, on purpose, on following your heart and following your inner wisdom and your intuition. And I focus also particularly for people who want to, make a difference in business and purpose, but it doesn't have to be just business alone. It's a very transformational week of really getting in touch with your inner knowing and your inner wisdom.
Mm.
So yeah, I would love you to join if that's calling you.
Thank you. And I will say I participated in your online retreat before, and I got so much out of it. So thank you so much for offering those out to us as well. Brilliant. Was there anything else that you're desperate to talk about that we haven't covered that you would like to share today?
Yeah, there's sort of one more thing, in which is, for me, there's been so much programming and conditioning, mainly unconscious, around how we think we should be and experience life. And I think so. I love this sort of pleasure and sexuality conversation. It's so important to understand that we can't figure out the way through from the mind and from what we see in the world, because like you said, we only see a very limited version of what's possible. Your body, right? Your body is this incredible temple of wisdom. And so through going through that body wisdom and sort of getting out of the head and into the heart, into the body, can start to waken up so much more. There's so much more richness. I talk about wealth and abundance, but for me it's this wealth of experience, this richness of living, that's so much greater than what we've been shown, what we've been sold, what we've been told. And so this is it. It's like waking up, like really trusting and listening to that inner knowing, even if it seems like I don't have any reference point for this. I don't see this anywhere. Is this okay? Am I allowed? And so yes, you're allowed, and yes, listen, and just try and be curious, like bring that kind of playful, childlike curiosity in this exploration,
Mm.
and start to trust in that inner wisdom, that your pleasure is incredibly wise. And so for me, I think it takes a lot of trust and faith and courage to really follow that knowing, even though we're not seeing those reference points necessarily
Mm.
outside in the external world yet, right? Yet,
Mm.
because we're going to be starting to see more and more, I think, in the future. At least I hope so, anyhow.
Fantastic. Thank you. That feels like a perfect place to end. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I will share the social media details and Lara's website in the comments for this video as well. So yeah, if anybody wants to connect, please do reach out. And similarly, if you've got any questions for me or want to find out any more about Desire Lines or the work that I'm doing, please connect and I will share those details as well. So thank you so much, Lara. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I will end the recording now. So thanks then. Bye.